Hey, what's going on, guys? Kalamazi here, and today I want to talk to you about Warlocks in Mythic Plus in 8.1. I'm going to be discussing Affliction, Demonology, and Destruction's best talents, Azerite traits you should be looking for, and my thoughts on the new traits, as well as just how each spec feels in Mythic Plus heading into 8.1, which is next week. If you're interested in any of the week auras or add-ons you've seen here, I'll have a link to my Twitch and Discord in the description below, where you can find them all. Alright, now starting off with Demonology here, there's not a huge difference between 8.0 and 8.1 talent-wise when heading into Mythic Plus. In the first row here, we have really the option between either Demonic Strength or Dreadlash, and most of the time I end up going with Demonic Strength here, both due to it being a strong DPS gain on single target encounters, as well as it being a really strong DPS cooldown on large trash pulls. I will say that I do take Dreadlash on skittish weeks, which is actually this week, because a good bit of the time when you hit Demonic Strength, your Fellow Guard will pull threat on most of the mobs and get squashed in about half a second. In the level 30 row here, our only option is Demonic Calling. Power Siphon is more so, at least it feels more like a single target talent, and honestly it just loses too much value, or you lose too much value, when you have to sacrifice imps in Mythic Plus. Unfortunately, Doom is just a bit undertuned and not something you want to be doing or casting in Mythic Plus, which leads us to Demonic Calling being the only trait we really want in Mythic Plus. In the 45 row, we have the option of Demon Skin, Burning Rush, or Dark Pact. I typically stay with Burning Rush with anything below a 10 or 12 key. Dark Pact is useful on tyrannical weeks in higher keys or higher settings in general, where you need that extra cooldown. In the level 60 row, we have the option of From the Shadows, Soul Strike, or Summon Vile Fiend. And Soul Strike did receive a small damage buff in earlier builds to the 8.1 PTR, and it's still going to be the choice that I make for Mythic Plus week 1. Summon Vile Fiend was pretty close to Soul Strike in Sims, but when it comes to actual Mythic Plus, with a lot of movement being factored in, Soul Strike is definitely where you want to be. You're able to cast it on a move, it has a short cooldown being only 10 seconds, and it generates a Soul Shard while you're moving. The damage buff, like I mentioned in the earlier PTR builds, makes it an even stronger choice. Now in the 75 row, we have the choice between Dark Fury, Mortal Coil, or Demonic Circle. Realistically, most of the time I end up running either Mortal Coil or Dark Fury. If you're running Dark Fury, it reduces the cooldown on actual Shadow Fury, which makes stunning both the spawns of Gahoon for infested keys much easier. Mortal Coil gives you a small stun / fear basically every 45 seconds, which you can hit a single spawn of Gahoon with or a problematic ad, but Dark Fury gives you a stun for both those ads, so typically I swap between both of these depending on group comp and what I'm needing. I do run Demonic Circle at times, half the time I just forget to change from it to a different talent, but you can use it in certain scenarios like, getting out quickly on the second boss in Tol Dagor, or cheesing Razan's Fear, but normally I typically end up sticking with either Mortal Coil or Dark Fury. In the 90 row here, we have Soul Conduit, Inner Demons, and Grimoire Felguard, and realistically our choices are either Inner Demons or Grimoire Felguard. Inner Demons passively spawns imps every few seconds for you, so it always gives you a few active pets when you're heading into a new actual pack or trash pull. And Grimoire Felguard is more so an AoE burst option. You can use it on single target fights as well, you will. But it's on a 2-minute cooldown, which is similar to having, your other cooldown being Demonic Strength, also tied to a 1-minute cooldown. Previously, in the very, very, very early stages of BFA's launch, or very late stages of PTR, or beta, Grimoire Felguard was much stronger. It was nerfed right before BFA went live, so the choice for me has mostly been Inner Demons this past season, and most likely will continue to be heading into 8.1. And taking a look at the level 100 row here, we have the choice of Sacrifice Souls, Demonic Consumption, or Nether Portal. Now, we're currently on live servers here, and the main difference between this Nether Portal and the one that's coming in 8.1 is that the one in 8.1 costs 1 Soul Shard and not 3, and has a duration of 15 seconds and not 20. Now, while I think Nether Portal is the coolest talent in this row, I also know it is the worst talent in this row in 8.1, and basically this patch as well. The unfortunate part about Nether Portal is that it's just drastically undertuned, not very strong in Mythic Plus anyways, and I think probably is going to need some pretty big type of rework to actually be competitive, because it's pretty unfortunate because it actually is my favorite trait. Regardless, the other options we have are Sacrifice Souls and Demonic Consumption. I've run Sacrifice Souls most of this season, pretty much all of this season actually. It's a passive and says Shadow Bolt and Demon Bolt deal 5% additional damage per demon you have summoned. So obviously you're going to gain more in your actual opener here when you use your Demonic Tyrant to extend the duration of your pets here. The main difference between it being on live servers and heading into 8.1 is that Shadow Bolt and Demon Bolt will now deal 4% additional damage in 8.1 per demon you have summoned. So it's about a 20% nerf if you want to look at it that way, but it really just depends on how many pets you actually have summoned at that point in time. Demonic Consumption also has been changed a good bit heading into 8.1. Your Demonic Tyrant now benefits a whole lot more from each imp he actually consumes when he's summoned. thus drastically increasing the demon fire damage he does. So the main thing here, and the thing I really want to talk about and keep an eye on heading into 8.1, is seeing the interaction between this new buff to this trait and Baleful Invocation. Baleful Invocation is a new trait that buffs your Tyrant's demon fire damage and also generates 5 soul shards whenever summoned. So the fact of the matter is, you're not going to generate obviously 10 or 15 soul shards if you have 2 or 3 traits. Traits don't work like that. Even if they would, you don't get past 5 shards. So stacking the second trait and the third trait of Baleful Invocation really is only going to buff your Demonic Tyrant's demon fire damage. But we really want to see in Sims if it's worth doing that, because I've tested it with 2 and 3 stacks, and the damage your Demonic Tyrant deals is really insane. It's only on a 1.5 minute cooldown, so we're really going to have to see how that plays out, but I'm really interested to see how Baleful Invocation affects our talent choices in the final row here in Mythic Plus. The traits that you're going to want to focus on acquiring for Demonology in Mythic Plus are Supreme Commander, Demonic Meteor, and Baleful Invocation. Supreme Commander is an all-around very strong trait for Demonology, and with it having only a 1.5 minute cooldown, can be used on trash frequently, then also the boss. Demonic Meteor greatly increases Hand of Gul'dan's impact damage and also grants you a 5% chance on refunding a soul shard when you cast Hand of Gul'dan. The percent chance is not stacked to 10 or 15%, however, at 2 or 3 traits, so it does lose a bit of value past the first initial trait. Baleful Invocation is the newest Demonology specific Azerite trait in 8.1, and is certainly going to be a trait that's sought after for Mythic Plus. Being able to instantly generate 5 soul shards is extremely powerful and can either fuel some very strong priority burst windows or a large implosion. The buff to your Tyrant's demon fire damage is just icing on the cake and really makes this a well-rounded trait. I'm currently looking at a set that consists of at least 1 Demonic Meteor trait, 1 Baleful Invocation trait with the possibility of more, and then multiple Supreme Commander traits thanks to the new 5th Azerite ring. Alright, now as far as Destruction goes, there's a little bit of customization, I guess you could say, in the later rows, but for the most part, things don't really change in the first few rows. In the 15th row, our options are Flashover, Eradication, and Soulfire. Unfortunately, Soulfire is just really undertuned right now, and Eradication is more so a single target talent in a sense. You're going to benefit a lot more so from Flashover than you will the other 2 talents. It's a passive, and so its Conflagrate deals 25% increased damage and grants an additional charge of Backdraft, which is really strong, especially when you're using Havoc. In the 30th row, we have the option of Reverse Entropy, Internal Combustion, or Shadow Burn. I will say that I have run Shadow Burn on explosive weeks, as you can tag explosive orbs with Shadow Burn, thus killing them, thus generating shards back and refunding you the Shadow Burn charge, and it has been powerful there and actually fun to play with, but the vast majority of the time I just run, well, pretty much every other time except for that, I run Reverse Entropy. It's basically a mini Heroism or Bloodlust. It's a passive and says your spells have a chance to grant you 15% haste for 8 seconds. Obviously, if this procs during a Havoc window or something like a burst phase, it's especially powerful. Unfortunately, Internal Combustion, while it has sort of a cool design on it, it's just way too much of a nuisance to maintain, especially in Mythic Plus. The 45 row, once again, Demon Skin, Burning Rush, or Dark Pact. Burning Rush on higher keys where you need the actual cooldown. Otherwise, Dark Pact and higher keys where you need the additional cooldown. Otherwise, I just stick with Burning Rush for the added mobility. In the 60 row here, we have the options of Inferno, Fire and Brimstone, and Cataclysm. And once again, the only real option in this row is Cataclysm. While Blizzard tried to make the 60 row, at least for Destruction, mostly AoE based, it sort of is an odd, Cataclysm is sort of an odd state, because also a single target DPS gain when it comes to refreshing your Immolates, as well as a large DPS gain when it comes to trash packs. So, now I do want to mention here briefly that, I'll discuss it a bit more here in a minute as well. Chaos Shards is the newest Destruction specific Azerite trait, and it does actually buff Incinerate damage, meaning it does buff Fire and Brimstone technically. Although running 3 Chaos Shards is pretty much not going to be where you want to be, and even if you were, I'm pretty sure it doesn't push Fire and Brimstone above Cataclysm in most scenarios. 75 row, once again, Dark Fury, Mortal Coil, Demonic Circle, typically Mortal Coil or Dark Fury depending on if I want a cooldown reduction on my Shadow Fury or just an extra incapacitate for a single ad. In the level 90 row, we have the option of Roaring Blaze, Grimoire Supremacy, and Grimoire of Sacrifice. Your only 2 options are basically Roaring Blaze or Grimoire of Supremacy. Grimoire, you're going to gain a lot more DPS, a lot more use of a talent, more so on bosses, where you're actually able to, cast spells and be in combat for the entire duration of your Infernal. It's basically a talent that you have tied to your 3-minute Infernal cooldown. So when you're actually not using your Infernal, this is effectively a dead talent. But once you're using it, or when you're using it, whether you're using it on trash or bosses, it's a very, very, very strong talent. You will gain a bit more from Roaring Blaze on trash if you're using your Infernal more on bosses than trash, but it really depends where you're using it. I tend to stick with Grimoire Supremacy over Roaring Blaze, but lately I have been testing more with Roaring Blaze. I like them both a good bit. So it just comes down to more so trash damage, you're going to gain more from Roaring Blaze. If you're looking for boss damage or using your Infernal more so on bosses, you're going to want Grimoire of Supremacy. In the final row here, we're going to ignore Soul Conduit again. I don't know why this is really a talent for any spec. Now it's been under tuned for patches and patches. We have Channel Demon Fire or Dark Soul Instability, not to be confused with Dark Soul Misery. Channel Demon Fire is you're going to be your go-to choice for AoE based scenarios, situations, Mythic Plus, and Dark Soul Instability is going to be your choice more so for single target encounters, or if you're looking to squeeze out a bit more boss damage, if you're in like a higher tyrannical key, if you can squeeze in 2 Dark Soul Instabilities, it's exceptionally strong. Like I said before, I've run builds consisting of basically, like certainly just Flashover, Reverse Entropy. These don't change. Pretty much just Cataclysm. Then I've run Roaring Blaze, Channel Demon Fire, Grimoire, Dark Soul, and basically just different combinations of these talents here. The 90 row and the 100 row are the 2 rows that change for Destruction. 30 row, the 15 row, 30 row, and 60 row really never change. So there's a decent bit of customization here. Honestly, they're all pretty close. Like I said, you'll gain a bit more. This would probably be the build I'd run for Tyrannical Weeks. If I was playing Destruction, you'll gain a lot from Supremacy, especially in conjunction with Dark Soul Instability. And if it was more of like a fortified, big teaming AoE Fest week, maybe something like Roaring Blaze or Channel Demon Fire. But you do also gain a lot out of Supremacy on trash packs. If it lives long enough, you can set up large Havoc windows. As a Destruction Warlock, the traits that you should be interested in are Crashing Chaos, Flashpoint, Rolling Havoc, and certain other stat-based traits like Archive of the Titans, even though it's technically not going to be as useful in 8.1. While Crashing Chaos is only active when your Infernal is active, it leads to some very strong Havoc windows, whether it be on trash or on multi-target boss fights. Flashpoint granting you a certain amount of haste when a target is above 80% health and it takes damage from the Immolate is pretty strong and will certainly lead to some really fast Havoc windows, especially in conjunction with Rolling Havoc. If you're able to enter a Havoc window with 4 shards, a Conflagrate charge, and a Flashpoint proc, you should have no issue squeezing in 3 Chaos Bolts and an Incinerate or 2. Pair this combo with Crashing Chaos as well and your DPS will skyrocket. Alright, I'm talking about Affliction in 8.1. There's not really a whole lot actually changed talent-wise heading into 8.1 that there really is from 8.0. In the 15 row, our only option is actually going to be, once again, Deathbolt. There was no changes to Drain Soul made on PTR, unfortunately, so it's a dead talent, and the same goes for Nightfall. Drain Soul is just drastically under tuned right now, and Nightfall is sort of in the same place. So our option here is Deathbolt, which fortunately is still in a pretty good place. I'm looking at the 30 row here. Realistically, our only options here are going to be either Writhe in Agony or Absolute Corruption. If you have multiple sudden onset Azerite pieces, you're better off running Writhe in Agony than Absolute Corruption here, but it does depend a bit on item level, and you don't really want to be running like a 350 Azerite piece that has sudden onset on it versus running like a 390 piece that has, Wrecking Brilliance or something on it in that case. We don't ever touch Siphon Life in Mythic Plus. It's too hard to juggle 3 dots on multiple targets, and you'll just gain more from running either Absolute Corruption or Writhe in Agony. Most of the time, if I'm not running my set consisting of 2 or 3 sudden onset pieces, I'll actually just run Absolute Corruption because it makes maintaining your dots on all your targets much easier, especially due to the fact that you can spread Corruption by just casting or pre-casting Seed Corruption on a mob, throwing an Agony on it or a Haunt or a Phantom Singularity depending on the mob, popping it, and just forgetting about Corruption for the rest of the poll. Really only makes having, the only chore you have to do is just refresh and maintain your Agonies. If you do run Writhe in Agony, you do have to watch out for, your Corruptions falling off. I'm going to touch on that a little bit more here as well when we discuss Affliction's newest trait, Pandemic Invocation. In the level 45 row, our options are either Demon Skin, Burning Rush, or Dark Pact. Same as before, I'll typically run Burning Rush most of the time unless I'm heading into a higher key. Whether it be Tyrannical or Fortified, having the additional cooldown in Dark Pact is pretty strong. In the 60 row here, we have Sow the Seeds, Phantom Singularity, and Vile Taint. Unfortunately, once again, Affliction didn't really receive very many changes at all on PTR and heading in this first week of 8.1, so Phantom Singularity once again is our only option. Vile Taint has been the same since later stages of beta, and the same with Sow the Seeds. They're both undertuned. Vile Taint I don't believe should cost a Soul Shard, and our only real option here is Phantom Singularity, both on single target and AoE based encounters. In 75 row, once again we have Dark Fury, Mortal Coil, or Demonic Circle. Most of the time I'll run either Dark Fury or Mortal Coil if I'm looking for like a single target Incapacitate, I'll run Mortal Coil. If I'm looking for, a reduced cooldown duration on my Shadow Fury, I'll run Dark Fury. There are some cheesing strats with Demonic Circle, but, overall it's just one of these two, especially with Infested being an affix. Even though it's going away in 8.1, having these stuns or incapacitates around is still very strong. In the 90 row, we have Shadow's Embrace, Haunt, or Grimoire of Sacrifice. Once again, realistically, our only option here is Haunt. Grimoire of Sacrifice is undertuned, and the same goes for Shadow's Embrace. It's effectively mostly a worse Haunt. So, in the level 100 row, our options are either Soul Conduit, Creeping Death, or Dark Soul Misery. Honestly, you can pretty much just ignore Soul Conduit and just say our options are Creeping Death or Dark Soul Misery. Creeping Death and Dark Soul Misery are both pretty close overall in Sims. Dark Soul Misery gets you a bit more on bosses, both in your opener as well as if you can fit in a second Dark Soul Misery on bosses, but I wouldn't fault somebody for just saying, hey, I don't really want to deal with Dark Soul Misery, I don't want to deal with another cooldown, I'll just take Creeping Death, because Creeping Death is very powerful on its own. So in the past, I've run builds consisting of Wrath and Agony, Dark Soul Misery, Wrath and Agony, Creeping Death, Absolute Corruption, Creeping Death, and Absolute Corruption, Dark Soul Misery. So there's some customization that lies in the level 100 row and the level 30 row, but the 60 row, 90 row, and 15 row don't ever change currently. Affliction has a few options as well when it comes to Mythic Plus, consisting of Sudden Onset and Racking Brilliance. Both Pandemic Invocation and Inevitable Demise are okay options in theory, but I would look to replace them if possible. Racking Brilliance is a great all-around trait for Warlocks in almost every scenario, and nothing changes in Mythic Plus. Thankfully, Racking Brilliance pieces will be much easier to acquire this patch, with both the Azurite vendor having them and the new raid dropping multiple pieces, unlike Uldir. Sudden Onset gains a tremendous amount of value in multi-target situations, and even more when paired with the Writhe and Agony talent. It's currently my favorite trait to play with in Mythic Plus right now, and thankfully it's available from multiple sources as well in 8.1. Inevitable Demise sadly has changed a lot in 8.1 from what it was in 8.0 though. It no longer generates stacks from Corruption, it now generates them from Agony. In addition to that, it now also caps out at 50 stacks and not 100 like it used to. It did receive a small damage buff when the change was announced to compensate, so it was technically a small buff in single target scenarios, but not being able to pre-cast Seed early and get it stacking via Corruption is a pretty big loss in Mythic Plus. While it won't be the worst trait in 8.1, it certainly won't be what it used to be. Pandemic Invocation is an interesting trait as well, but if you want to run it in Mythic Plus, you'll most likely be forced into Wrath and Agony over Absolute Corruption, as running Absolute Corruption would only give you 1 dot to refresh. Its usefulness will really come down to timing your Seed of Corruption refresh correctly, as well as your Agonies, and the fact that it does not play well with refreshing dots on the move makes me hesitant to actually run this trait in Mythic Plus. Thanks for watching, guys. I hope this gave you all a better understanding of each Warlock spec and what traits and talents you should be looking for heading into 8.1. I will admit that I'm still expecting a bit of Affliction nerfs and tuning either before the raid is released or after week 1, but I suppose we'll have to just wait and see what happens. Thankfully, all 3 specs are in a good place right now, so Warlock is certainly a great choice heading into 8.1, both for Mythic Plus and in raid. If you guys want to see more WoW content and help support the channel, smash those like, share, and subscribe buttons, as your support really helps. Thanks so much, guys, and I'll see y'all next week in 8.1. Peace.